Welcome to the Grad Life Podcast, where we're talking about all things grad.
I'm Rami.
And I'm Jess.
We're going to be talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
Hashtag DEI. All right, let's get into it. Today we're talking about a bit of a sensitive topic, depending on how this goes.
And I don't know if it always has to be labeled as like a super sensitive topic, right? Like I think it can be, as long as it's explained properly, I think that it can be talked about more openly than people think. But we have some awesome guests with us on our show today. We have Betsy McLean and Andrew Wilbraham. You guys want to say hello and introduce yourselves?
Hi, guys.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Wilbraham, a double alum here from Newman, and I actually did my capstone project on, diversity, equity, inclusion, and how it really affects the recruitment and retention of minority staff members, and how it also affects the student body. So glad to be here.
Awesome.
Hey, it's Betsy McLean. I am a double alum of Newman, and I also have my MBA from Rosemont College. And I was the co-chair of the education subcommittee for the DEI Council at Newman. And we were able to do some racial justice challenges with the faculty, staff, and undergrad and graduate students in the past year or so. So super excited to be here and talking about DEI today.
Awesome.
All right, to start off, can we talk about how we define DEI in our own words? If you guys can start with that.
Sure. So I think DEI, obviously it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mm-hmm. And it's more than just about race. It's about all of the different ways that are unique ways that make us different, and how as people, we should be aware of that. That's what DEI means to me. But I want to add one more letter, actually. To me, it's
a curveball right here.
I know. It's DEIB. So diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging.
Okay.
I like that.
And I think people forget about that B all the time. Like, obviously, diversity is like, how are we all different? Equity is about how we're trying to help everyone get on the same playing field with the tools that they need. Some people may need more tools than others, but how can we make sure they have the tools that they need to be successful? Inclusion, obviously, making sure that people are being included and welcomed. But belonging, it's a tricky one, because that's not so much of what we're doing for others, but it's like, how are they feeling? Do they feel like they belong within a company, organization, group, or whatever?
Almost like it's not about just including them because they need to meet a quota or something. It's actually believing that they belong there.
Yeah, and themselves as the individual feels they belong, not we say you're belonging.
Yeah.
You actually make the effort to make them feel like they belong.
Or the individual. The individual, like me, like I feel like I belong here. Mm-hmm. Versus you saying, Betsy, you belong here. Do you see where the difference is?
Yeah.
So what can someone do to help you feel like you belong here?
I think you need to ask them the questions of like, what do you need from us? Getting to know their background, their culture, their needs, and acting accordingly.
Yeah. Actually doing what you say you're going to do for that person. I like that. Andrew, what about you?
Betsy definitely hit a lot of it, but definitely that piece of education. I think in today's world, there's a lot going on with this topic, but really making sure that, no matter what field you're in, you really have to be educated on what's going on. And you also want to match, especially in a higher education setting, do you have the staff in place that represents the student population? Because that's going to further make them feel a sense of belonging. That's going to help with recruitment. That's going to help with retention in both the faculty and staff side and on the student side. So that's definitely something that I would add there.
It helps to see people that look like you.
For sure.
100%.
And as a student, you're always like, you want to model yourself after someone. And especially like if you're a first generation student and you didn't have that person to look up to, you don't have the parents to look up to that also went to college and furthered their education, but you have like a professional staff member, a professor, a person that works in administration. Yeah, go ahead. There you go, Robbie. Like if you have somebody that looks like you and came from a similar background as you, it gives you that confidence. Like it boosts you.
Yeah, it makes you feel like if they can do it, I can do it. I belong here too. So going back to what you said, Betsy, makes me feel like I belong in that area. Like if I find someone who's also a first generation Middle Eastern kid with a Middle Eastern background, let's say, and they went through a DPT program that I happen to be in also, it makes me feel like, hey, like I can do this too. It's not like I'm just doing this without no guidance or anything. Like there's someone there that I could benefit from asking them questions about how they did certain things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just doesn't go back to like in the school setting too, right? Like whether you're working at a certain company or organization, you see leaders or colleagues that come from different backgrounds and have, different socioeconomic status and, different just backgrounds that make you feel like, wow, I'm getting so many different perspectives, right? And and I think that's the beauty of DEI or DEIB, because if you only hang out with like one set of people, you're missing out on so much.
Yeah.
Right? Like one of the things I learned in our business and organizational leadership master's program was one of the strengths that a leader can have is like the ability to take a look at certain situations from so many different perspectives. And I think that's why I loved that piece of grad school, because we had people from all different like backgrounds and industries. Like I was mingling with people in IT and in healthcare and different age groups.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so important because now I always think like, okay, before I make a decision on something, how could somebody else take it? What are the consequences? And not make a quick decision.
Yeah. Even in like students' research sometimes, like, like in a lot of our programs, like you have to present on your research and like you said, how is somebody else in this class going to take this? And how can I be appropriate when I'm presenting this type of information, because there is so many people from so many different backgrounds, especially in the grad level.
Yeah, one of my my actual research project for this semester, as I'm graduating, we all are required to do a research project.
Yeah, you're graduating.
Yeah, that's scary. I'm going to miss it. It's kind of bittersweet. But we are looking at self-care in DPT program, the influence of self-care on depression, anxiety, and stress in DPT students, because we're looking at that specific population since it's a sample of convenience and they're there, we can just test them. And we're able to look at the demographics that we're going to have them fill out. So we have people of different cultural backgrounds, and that'll help like see maybe like you're a Middle Eastern person, you practice one faith, and that helps a lot with how your levels of depression and stress and anxiety are versus someone who just goes to the gym and is, let's say, agnostic or something. So it helps to see like there are different ways to cope with stress, anxiety, and depression. And that kind of helps you see that there are people with different backgrounds that deal with that a different way too.
Yeah.
Which I think is really helpful to see.
I think that's so interesting. I can't wait to hear more about that.
I'll let you know.
Yeah,
November.
For sure. And I think going back to like people with different backgrounds, they're also struggling, I think, with assimilating to this like culture here.
Oh, yeah.
Especially what we call the grad life culture too, right? Like, being first generation undergrad and graduate student, it's tough. Like people think that you've already went through like undergrad, so you should know how to navigate like the grad world. And it's like, no,
not at all.
Yeah, it's like scary. And that's why that like perspective comes into play, because you don't know what people are going through in their own lives. Like, people battling with anxiety and depression and all of that stuff. Depending on what background you're coming from, like they might not feel comfortable in general, people may not feel comfortable talking about it, but in some cultures, like for example, the Indian culture, or at least the culture that I grew up in within our community, like we're just now saying, okay, let's talk about struggles.
Yeah.
And so you have to just be aware.
And that kind of goes back to professors or employers bringing it up and making you feel belonged. Like if a student is struggling with something, but maybe they come from a culture that doesn't really openly talk about it, what are some other ways that you can allow the student to feel comfortable in that space where everyone else is like, oh, let's talk about it now. And they're like, nah, I'm not really used to doing that, so I'm just not going to talk about it. How do you make them feel welcomed and make them feel like they belong in that same setting?
Sure. I mean, I would say it boils down to one, values and your relationship. Like I feel like you need to have relationships with the people you're encountering, especially as like a professor or an admin or even your colleagues. Like grad is so different from undergrad. Many of us are working or at least have a part-time job, and some have kids. And so it's a whole different set of things that come up. And so it's so important to like get to know each other. I'm not saying like become best friends with everybody, but like you're essentially working as a team to get to the end goal of graduation. So like building that relationship and that trust where it's like, okay, Andrew, like we're in the same class, I'm struggling over here, and maybe you can cover me with taking notes, and I can, review your notes or review a topic with me or something like that. Like that's important, that relationship that we build. And that relates right back to DEI too. That's all it is. It's relationships and being able to step back and understand one another. You don't have to agree, but you just need to have that mutual respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that kind of like really segues into like the next question of what is something that grad students can specifically do right now that'll help them when they become professionals or when they move on after grad school, that'll help them with DEI?
I think just really getting involved and staying educated in what's happening today, but also like if your company or wherever you work for has these like DEI councils or anything, just joining these certain committees, organizations that are already in place will definitely help them as well. But it's also, you really want to push yourself out of your comfort zone, because if you don't push yourself out of your comfort zone, you're not going to grow. And that's the same thing for DEI. The more educated you are on these topics, the more you can really make the space that you're in with your colleagues, your coworkers, anyone that you oversee, but feel that sense of belonging. And that's kind of, I think, what it boils down to. As long as you're educated, you can then make everybody else aware, and then store that sense of belonging in everybody else that you kind of come in contact with.
Yeah, knowledge is power, right? We say that all the time. And knowledge is not just coming from books. It's coming from hearing others' experiences and stories, because you can't take away what they've gone through. And so when you're able to listen to what others have gone through, then you have a different perspective, or at least a bit of an understanding on what, could happen when DEI is not implemented correctly, or, people struggle with that.
Yeah, it's easy to stay in your own lane, right? It's easy to just do what you've always been doing for your whole life, but it really takes a sense of leadership to step up and step out and say, I'm going to learn about things that I've never learned about before, and I'm going to listen to other people like in ways that I've never listened before, so I understand exactly where they're coming from. And that's huge. So if you could practice anything right now as a grad student, it should be that. And that way, when you do move on to your professional work setting or continue moving on in your professional work setting, you can then take those skills that you're learning in your grad program and apply them to real world knowledge.
Yeah, it's such a good point, because I feel like people think like DEIB is like, it has to be like some big initiative and we have to put on like all of these like, educational pieces. And I think that piece is important, but it just boils down to what you just said, Jess, is like the ability to just like listen to others. And I always say, we cannot change the world. We want to change the world, right? But we can't. But we can try to have influence on the community or our organization or the people around us. And that starts with looking within and looking like at yourself and reflecting. And so when you start hearing other people's experiences, then you can kind of understand a little bit better. And then you can speak up next time if somebody says something that is not appropriate. And that small act makes a huge difference. And that can be applicable in any setting, whether it's in grad school or in an organization that you're working for. And the person or people that might feel, hurt, they're gonna like think, wow, like somebody spoke up for me. Like I've been on the receiving end of, where there was racism or there were, comments made because I don't come from money and, my parents were born in India and so was I. And I came here when I was 3. And so my parents were like learning the culture essentially and like learning how to assimilate to the American culture. And there's been so many times where we've been embarrassed or I've been embarrassed. And so that hurts. But when somebody else stands up and says something, man, that feeling is like the best.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have a voice and somebody
speaks up for you.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
Yeah. So like a personal experience for me that I've had was my husband's first generation American. I didn't even know that, honestly, when I first met him. But just certain things that like he would say or do that I didn't really just like understand. Like I didn't get why he didn't know certain things about the American culture or, certain like music stars or movie stars or just like anything that was like really American. He was kind of like in this own little bubble, and I would say things like, how do you not know that? Or like, can you explain to me like why, you didn't learn this over the course of time? But then I had to really think about like, all right, he's coming from a different world. Like his parents are totally from a different country and they came here, when they were in their 20s. And so they had to learn things, and then they had him in their 20s. So they then didn't really teach him the American stuff because they were learning it too. So that's something that like I had to listen to him, and I had to understand like, okay, he's not going to know everything that I knew growing up, right? So that was just like an example that I had that I wanted to share. Just an example of how when you listen and you understand, then you do better. And that's what's important. It's okay to make mistakes, but do better next time.
I thought I was the only one because I didn't know about Footloose or like Back to the Future or any of these like pop culture things. Like I didn't know. I literally watched Back to the Future for the first time like 2 years ago.
Oh my God, I just watched it for the first time like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it is such a good movie.
I love
it. And
that.
Everybody talks about it. I'm like, I don't know that. I have no idea.
I don't think I still have seen it. I really don't think I've seen it.
It's good.
Really?
Check it out.
Who's next with their personal experiences?
I have so many personal experiences, but I just think one of the things that sticks out to me really is like, I don't know if you guys can believe this, but English is my second language, like for real. Like
I wouldn't.
I really like learned that today almost. I think about you. So
like I said, I was born in India, right? And my parents literally left me a couple of months after I was born, so they can come here and like build a better life and all that good stuff. And they finally had the money to bring me over when I was 3 years old. But by that time, I had already started speaking, and so I had to go to ESL as all through kindergarten and elementary school to like learn English. But I still struggle with language today, and that's something that people don't understand because, and Rami, I don't know if you speak another language at home.
I speak 2 other languages.
So, like, I don't know if you struggle too, but sometimes, like, if I want to say something,
you think of it in the other language.
I have to think about it in the other language,
Yes.
but then it like doesn't like move fast enough in my head to my mouth to come out. Like, you know what I mean? And so like there's been times where like I stutter or like I'm delayed in my responses, and like I've been judged on that or like made fun of because of that. And when I was younger, I would be like embarrassed about it, but now I'm like, and you guys hear me say this all the time, like English is my second language. And like I say it as a joke, but seriously, like I do struggle with the language. Like, and so I explain that to people, and then they feel kind of like, oh, sorry, like, but it's an example of like you can't judge a book by its cover. Like, I don't have an accent, so you think, okay, like, you must have been born here, or you only speak one language, but it's more than that. So it's an example of, like, really, you can't just assume things without getting to know someone.
And is that, like, a comfortable matter for you? So it's, like, kind of being on the other side, like, having, being able to tell someone that they're wrong in a situation, or like you didn't consider this factor type of deal, like, and you were bold enough to do that. And like, how do we encourage other people to do that? And I mean, in the grad school age, you know, varies, but sometimes they are younger and they're 22 to 24-year-olds and like maybe don't have that confidence to speak up when something hurts them. So how would you encourage someone to do that?
I actually think age doesn't matter in terms of that.
Yeah.
Like, I think, you know, no matter what age, sometimes if you're embarrassed or don't have the confidence, or even that imposter syndrome that can happen to anyone at any age, it is scary to speak up. You have to just become comfortable with who you are as a unique person and understand that your uniqueness is so much needed in this world. And once you get comfortable with that, you're able to call people out. And it's not easy. It's very uncomfortable sometimes because you don't know how that person is going to like receive it when you're like, hey, that really wasn't a joke, or hey, that what you said was like not appropriate. But you just have to build that confidence and say it, because once you do it the first time, they're not going to make that joke again, or probably because they're probably going to double, you know, think twice before they say something.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, man. I mean, the only thing that I could really think of where I felt kind of marginalized in a way. So I got to take a step back. I don't know if I've ever told you guys this. Like, I've made a joke about how I'm a Renaissance man. Like, I've been through Jewish pre-K. I went through Catholic school until 6th grade, raised Muslim, religion major in undergrad, like the whole 9 yards. During my transition from Catholic school to public school, this was in the 7th grade, I felt marginalized in a way because they threw me into an ESL class. I'm 12 years old. I speak full-on fluent English. I went through Catholic school. You could see my transcripts. I've been through every class. There was nowhere on my transcripts that said that I'm only Arabic speaking or English speaking or anything like that. And they threw me in. They just took me out of class one day and was like, yeah, we're going to take you down to this classroom. And they made me have to take like an English speaking test. And I was looking at it like it was really pointless. It was all simple math. I mean, simple English.
I was about to say, if there was a math on an English test, I would definitely fail.
I'd be really mad. But I felt mad. I was like really mad about that. And I felt like I didn't belong in school at that day. Yeah. And like the teacher apologized to me, like the one that was giving me the ESL exam. I didn't know what to say. I was just like really upset. And like after I was done, I just walked out and went back to class. Like it was no big deal. No one ever bothered me about it afterward. But it was just like, why'd you do that? Like, why are you assuming?
Yeah.
Like I was already in school for 2 weeks. I already came from Catholic school. I'm in 7th grade. What do you think I was doing for the last 11 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like weird. Like I have my citizenship. I have everything. You have all those papers.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like a weird move. I didn't understand at the time, like what it was.
Right.
So anyway, here I am.
Well, I'm sorry that you had to go through that.
Yeah.
But isn't it interesting how little things like that, or the stories that we've shared so far, like that sticks with us?
Yeah.
And that just goes right back to DEIB, why it's so important and it should be sprinkled throughout everyday life.
I don't know if it was because of my last name. Like, does it sound too foreign for you? Like, whatever.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter to me.
There could be a wide range of reasons why people say the things that they say.
That's true.
It's probably their upbringing and their background, and that's why
it's unfortunate.
But it's so important to make sure that you're educating yourself, so that way you don't go and assume.
Education never stops. You should be a lifelong learner.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
True.
Oh.
Sorry.
I didn't know if you had
off,
one or
Jess.
not, but I was just gonna go ahead.
Put you on the spot. Sorry.
So, obviously, being a white man, haven't experienced too much of the marginalization. But I think as I get older and kind of learning more about myself, obviously there has been times or there will be times that I think I will be marginalized. Just certain, I don't want to like go too deep into it, but just certain aspects of my identity that I haven't really made public, that I know if they were, that I would definitely get some of that treatment. And I definitely am prepared to deal with that when it comes. But just seeing some of the things that have happened to people like me, it definitely makes me a little apprehensive and nervous to divulge that kind of thing. But yeah, that's kind of the only thing I would really say. I don't have like a specific experience because it hasn't really happened to me yet, but I know that it's a possibility that it could or would happen to me.
And it's important that you're aware of those things and that they can happen and or could happen. And then also, like, if you have other people in your cohort, right, or people that you work with that you've seen these things happen to them, you're in tune and you understand, and you can be a voice for them as well.
Absolutely. And that feeling of like, being anxious or fearful or whatever, like it's the same type of feeling that others might go through when they are experiencing like negative comments regarding DEI and stuff like that. And that's the common ground, right?
Yeah.
Like we all have different experiences, but we can understand each other's like feelings and what we may not be understanding like or able to understand what somebody goes through and exactly feels, but you can get like a little snippet of it. And that empathy like plays a big role with DEIB too.
Definitely goes back to just not knowing, like, again, what are certain people's internal biases? What are their internal prejudices? Like, what do they see when they look at you? And, it's not just, oh, like, I'm a human, but like, what are they labeling me as? And you never know. And that's where I think the fear comes. Like the second that someone's looking at you, they're already making up their mind of how they view you. So it's definitely scary.
Yeah. I know that like within like a grad school setting, we should already be doing this ourselves, right? Like we should be practicing understanding DEIB on a regular basis. But in order to have certain things in our face constantly, is there something that you guys would recommend that should be implemented within any school setting or any workplace setting?
I think definitely when it comes to, like I know undergrad, there's like certain core requirements that students have to take. I think that every student should have to take some type of DEI related class. I think, there's obviously world religions classes, there's these different classes, but I think, I know there's actually other universities around here that have to take like 4 courses that are actually in that DEI realm. So the more educated they are, and also having someone who identifies, as, DEI, whether they come from a different country, sexuality, whatever, teach those classes as well. So that these students see that it's not just, your cisgendered white male teaching about diversity. It's someone who actually is passionate about this topic and wants to educate the students. So, and also I think that should be integrated in grad curriculum as well, because you always want to continue the learning because the learning never stops.
Yeah, we end up doing that in PT a lot because we end up talking to a lot of different people of all different types of backgrounds. So in terms of like patient simulations and stuff, like we always have some sort of different cultural backgrounds that we have to educate ourselves on and understand what's rude and what's not. Like extending your hand to shake their hand might be considered rude in some cultures. Other cultures are like, we can't touch you. I need to work with a female instead of a male. Things like that are something that you have to be like really sensitive about as well in order to make sure that these patients feel included and feel like they can come to, let's say, my office, my PT clinic the next time that they're scheduled for, instead of feeling like they're not comfortable and never coming back and ending up not getting the healthcare that they need. That's really important.
It's basically just cultural competency. And I know a lot of like obviously PT and nursing, like anyone in the healthcare kind of goes through that. They get trained on, different cultures and things like that. But that should be in every program, no matter it's undergrad, grad, doctoral. That should definitely be in any curriculum.
Even in businesses too.
Oh, yeah.
It boils down to one word for me, and it's part of our values at Newman. It's reverence. The respect for whatever culture, background, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think that is embedded in the curriculum, and you just need to talk about it in different ways.
Yeah.
Like you guys do a great job in DPT and understanding cultural competency and understanding different backgrounds. And the story or what you mentioned about like different cultures, like not being able to shake hands or, females having to work with females and stuff. Like there was like a time where like I don't know if it was like me just not understanding. I guess it was a time where I was not culturally aware. For my honeymoon, my husband and I ended up going to Dubai, and we like did it last minute, right? We're like, we didn't book a honeymoon. We should probably book something like 2 weeks before our wedding. And when we went there, we didn't do any like prior planning, essentially. And so when I got there, I remember at the airport, it was a man that took my passport to do like my like visa stuff. And he like never handed me back my passport and just put it down on the counter. And I was like, well, that's rude, but okay, like, whatever. Yeah. And then we get to our luggage, and somebody was taking us to the like taxi, and the man was talking to my husband and asking him like, where are you from and things like that. And I would answer.
Wow.
But then he would like wait for my husband to answer. So I'm like, well, if this is how this trip is going to go, like, this is not going to be fun. Again, just my lack of awareness for the culture. And then after, like, I sat back and was like, what is going on? Like, is it me? Like, what is happening? And then I'm like, oh, yeah, like, culturally, that is, like, men aren't really supposed to correspond with females or, like, touch females or whatever. And I'm like, oh, well, that makes total sense. It's, like, culturally appropriate. But in my head, I thought it wasn't appropriate because of the culture I came from.
Yeah, it's not a matter of them trying to disrespect you in any way. It's actually, like, the opposite. It's showing you respect,
right?
And that they don't want to bother you, they don't want to touch you or make it seem like they're being inappropriate in any way whatsoever,
right?
They're going to talk to their male counterpart instead and make everything go through them instead of bothering you with any of that stuff. But and Islamically, it's a big thing too.
Yeah, but it's a simple misunderstanding because I didn't know, what I mean? And so
it's that miscommunication that causes the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's something that everybody should be aware of, is that educate yourself and like know that it's not particularly someone being rude to you.
Yep.
It's just being respectful and understanding of another person's culture.
Yep.
There's different ways to be respectful of each other.
Absolutely. And I ended up falling in love with the culture.
Oh, thank you.
It's beautiful.
It's a great place, right?
Yes, it is.
I take pride in that.
All right, I think we can maybe have time for one more question, but I'm pretty sure we're at like... Matt, does it say how long we've been talking?
Let me see.
He's off there in a gaze, just doing his own thing.
I got 35 minutes.
35 minutes?
Yeah.
All right. I think that's good with some takeouts that we might have. So we're going to end with one question.
Should we talk about first generation at all a little bit more?
Yeah, we can. Did you want to say, what question did you want us to ask you?
I can just be like, hey, like, Betsy, I know we were talking yesterday about first generation problems and experiences. Did you want to go into any more deeper understanding of that, deeper discussion?
Or like advice for like first generation.
Because you seemed very, very passionate about it yesterday.
Yes.
So your eyes open up with passion.
I don't even remember what I said though, but okay.
She just had a train.
Can you just ask her, like, can you give advice for first generation students regarding DEIB?
Betsy, in regards to DEIB, could you give any advice to first generation graduate students?
Sure. I think not just first generation graduate students, but anyone that's either looking to go back and get their graduate degree or doctoral degree, current students, people in the business world, healthcare, whatever. I think my biggest advice is like, one, learn to love yourself and to embrace all the uniqueness that comes with who you are. And don't be scared, like Andrew said earlier, to come out of your comfort zone, because we need leaders with different backgrounds in different roles in all industries. And graduate school is a tool that can help you get there, right? And so sometimes, you know, imposter syndrome kicks in where you think you don't belong or you're not qualified to do something. But you have to fight through that, because other people are looking up to you. It's not just younger people looking up to you. There's others, like especially like, you know, parents that paved the way, that came here from a whole different culture. Like they're looking to you to make a difference. So if you're looking to go back to grad school or grow in your career, whatever you're wanting to do, like fight through all the negative thoughts that happen in your head, because we all know that happens, especially for first generation students who most of the time are trying to navigate life and the journey that is by themselves, even though they might have support, but it's a different type of support. Yeah. So just love on yourself and go for it.
I love that. That's probably like the best piece of advice like you could have given for this topic. That's like, love yourself and then lead the way.
Love yourself and love others. It's a mantra that I live by.
Love yourself and love others.
And that sums it up for DEIB.
It does.
Well, thank you guys for joining us today and talking about this important topic.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Always welcomed back.
All right. Take care, everybody.